We're joined by Professor Jennifer Rubin from ESRC, Dr. Ian Campbell from Innovate UK, Professor Mark Thomson from STFC, and Professor Melanie Welham from BBSRC. If you're watching us on the live stream, use Slido to share your questions. If you're in the room, then there is a roving mic. Just stick your hand up and we will try and do that. And Mariki down here, I guess, has got the questions that are coming in. So who's got a question?
It'd be good to have the lights up, actually.
It's quite bright here, and that's better. Right. Yes. Do you want a mic? There's just if you just say it, I'll repeat it if you like.
Of course. I'm James from Innovate UK. Absolutely fantastic presentation. Thank you so much. Really informative. One thing I would like to get your angle on is specifically SMEs that we deal a lot with. And within those, I know they were encapsulated. Thanks very much. I just wanted to know the panel's view.
It is on.
Thank you. Can we turn up the microphones? So I just wanted to know the panel's view about what they see as the role of SMEs carrying out innovation for the UK, because obviously they're prime candidates for growth.
So before I answer it, I didn't ask James to plant the question in case anybody asks me. SMEs clearly play a vital role in enabling new technologies to be translated from invention through innovation into commercial success, but they are one ingredient within the whole UKRI remit. So whilst we will all support SMEs and continue through not just Innovate but other research councils and are working with them, the bigger programmes will involve SME growth but also involve funding in academic initiatives as well, but SMEs clearly are at the heart of what we're trying to do.
Anyone else from here, the room? Yes. Right, in the middle, there's a microphone working its way along the row to you.
Hi, I'm Sadhna Sharma from BBSRC. My question is to the panel and to Mark, who said we definitely have to succeed. What would success look like?
What would success look like?
What would success look like? Well, I mean, success at the end of the day is getting outputs and outcomes from the work that we fund that basically do what we want, which is develop economic growth, generate knowledge that actually improves society generally. What we are about is actually not, I think there's been too much focus in the past on getting the money out of the door and not understanding what it is that happens with it. So the success is about all of that funding we're using, we're delivering, doing what it says on the tin. So it's about strength in places, growing clusters in parts of the country that have small-scale economic success, but where there is the opportunity to scale it through research and innovation. It's about researchers discovering, it's about people at the Rosalind Franklin Institute developing those cameras that will see if the chemotherapy can be delivered more effectively and turning that into benefit for patients with cancer. It's about, again, going back to that electron microscope I talked about, using that to demonstrate that we can develop new drugs. It's about, I'm going this afternoon to the Foreign Office, where they're launching a knowledge exchange scheme between ESRC, AHRC, and the Foreign Office. It's about demonstrating that researchers throughout the country in the social sciences, in the arts and humanities, in engineering, can work with the Foreign Office to increase the ability for them to do their policy work. So there's no single measure, but it's about looking in a bespoke way at each of the things we're doing and seeing what the outputs and the outcomes are. In the Faraday Challenge, it is actually about moving towards an electric a motor car and having better batteries. In healthy aging, it's about developing new economic models for delivering social care so that we can all stay in our homes in a healthier and more full fashion for longer. So there's no single measure, but we've got to look through the lens of what is it are we trying to achieve with any particular piece of funding, and is it doing what it says on the tin? And that's not about recognizing that we're not taking a huge amount of risk. But the good risk is taking talented people and giving them money to take on a tough problem. What's not a good idea is if our peer review processes don't work well and we end up giving money to people who, for whatever reason, are not talented and aren't going to deliver. So it really is on focusing on the quality of the teams, be it the money that Innovate UK spends in SMEs. It's about, is there a good team in the SME? Is there a good team in the company? Is there a good team in the university? So we've got to be very careful not to try and reduce this. We can't reduce this to a single number. But I suppose another success measure is, will the country, will all of us as taxpayers want to continue to invest in UK research and innovation? We will only get to that 2.4% if industry invests as well. Because if you look across the OECD, 2/3 of the investment in research and development comes from industry. And so if the new public money doesn't persuade the private sector to increase its investment as well, then the Treasury will take an enormous amount of persuasion to continue on that trajectory. But what we've got to think about always is, what does success look like? And we can't reduce it to just a number.
Can I just take one from here, actually, as well, which has come in, which is quite a broad question, but what are UKRI doing, and I think, Jennifer, it's probably one for you, what are UKRI doing to inform educators from early years to secondary schools to address gender stereotypes and positively impact the number of females in STEM? So it sort of plays to the EDI kind of question.
It absolutely does. Thank you. Great question, and I wish I had all the answers to that right now. I'll just set out a few first thoughts. Of course, we're not educators of primary and secondary school students ourselves in the research that we fund. But as lead on EDI for UKRI, one of the first things I want us to do is to actually start to gather together the evidence base that does exist for what are the challenges for bringing through the best talent into our research and innovation system. And as soon as you start doing that, of course, you get back to some of the challenges are, of course, within the actual kind of university research sector, but some of them start far further back. And we won't be able to tackle those challenges unless, first of all, we know what actually works to tackle them. So we've got to understand what the challenges are, where they start, how far back do they go, what works, what do we know about what works to tackle them, and where there are gaps, we need to actually be willing to go out there and build that evidence base. And our researchers in the research sector that we fund absolutely can play a really important role in that. And we can fund what work centres that help gather that information, and we can fund researchers who can do the primary research that will help us understand that better. But it's going to be about the psychology, it's going to be about the structures and processes and policies that support that, and about the culture of the places, whether it's schools or universities and beyond. So we're absolutely going to work at all those levels with the tools that we have available, and working with the Department for Education and working with our colleagues who do work in those fields to actually achieve that. So I'm really excited at all the things at our disposal to start to make progress.
I just want to add one thing to that, which is that one of the things we will be taking over as part of our role in public engagement is the STEM Ambassador scheme. And there are some very good schemes, such as STEM ambassadors and speakers in schools. How many people in this audience are either a STEM ambassador or a speaker in schools? That's a reasonable number of hands going up, which is great. But I'd like to, next time we do this, see twice the number of hands going up. Because, and I think it's quite important we get into primary schools as well as secondary schools as well, because that's where the science, the STEM education is weakest. So there's a lot that we can do organisationally to do this stuff ourselves, actually. And it was a good array of hands went up, so that's great.
Another question from somewhere towards the back.
Whilst I appreciate that this whole conference has been about what we intend to do in the future, what are you going to do for the staff at the moment in terms of retention, recruitment, and are there possible redundancies in the future?
I think I'm going to take that one. I think that so I'll break it down into two parts. Firstly, I think it is incumbent on every part of the executive team to lead their own parts of the organisation, but to a common people agenda. So I would expect every research chair to be leading their area. I would expect myself and Rebecca, who's not able to be here today, we will lead our own teams to make certain we get the right structures in the right places. We are not setting out on this journey to make lots of people redundant. That is not the objective. We've got more money to spend, and we will need more people to help us spend that money. What we have to do is to work to iron out the things where we're duplicating activity, and we have to also, as I said in my presentation, we have to also look at the systems and the processes that we've got and try and streamline them so that actually we can remove some of the work that is involved, but then we can utilize people in better ways. So my objective would be to enhance people's roles, and that is what I'm working towards doing, and I think that would be the same for everybody in the councils. Mark.
Wrong Mark.
Sorry.
I mean, I think we're certainly within STFC, and I'm sure the other councils are the same. We recognise staff retention as an absolutely core issue. It's probably one of the biggest risks to our success, is retaining the people with the expertise to deliver our programme. And that's something certainly within my council we're starting to look at, trying to understand, at least understand what the key issues are, and then try to use those issues to develop a policy, particularly around retention of key people in key areas. If we don't do that, we're going to have difficult delivering our mission.
I mean, I just want to add, the project of creating UKRI was not a project based on savings per se, but we do have to be corporately efficient. We do have to get the benefits of working collectively, and as we introduce new systems, there will be different ways of working. So there is always natural turnover in an organisation, and that's actually a healthy thing. There are particular areas, particularly around some of the sort of the skills that, for example, are critical to keeping Harwell going, the people that are needed to run a spallation source or a synchrotron. And so there are some very specialist skills. But as we evolve systems, jobs will change. And can we sit here and say there won't be any redundancies? Of course we can't. But it's not primarily driven by savings. It's driven by doing our job better.
Mark Thomson, one of the other questions that's come in is about, and it is anonymous, so I don't know whether it applies to SCSC, but is about people in the councils leaving because of their salaries and not keeping up. And I know this is an issue that you and I have talked about, particularly in Harwell. Is there anything that you can say about how you might address that issue?
This comes back to the retention issue. It's something that we recognise as a problem within our particular organisation. Harwell is located in Oxfordshire. It's not the cheapest place to live in Britain. There are more competitive, there are salaries out there which are clearly better. Now our people I believe like to work on the campus. They like the excitement of the projects we're working on, but retention is an issue. So what we're trying to do specifically is we've launched a piece of work to actually do an analysis, to actually get the facts written down on paper, understand what the salary differentials are, and also to understand the long-term impact if we don't address this. So the way I'm planning to actually address this is to develop a business case for actually looking at the impact of not doing anything, which I think could potentially be serious over the timescale of 5 years. But I think we have to do this in a quantitative way. We actually have to develop the arguments and then take the arguments up to UK research and innovation, and presumably ultimately higher than that. But it's an active area within STFC.
And I think just one more thing that I think it's important to say, which is that we are still a public sector organisation. And the reality is, when you look across the public sector, it is, and has been for quite a long time, quite a squeezed environment. But we don't have a sort of special pass to behave differently. We are part of the public sector, and so we are significantly subject to public sector rules. And we are also part of a market economy, and of course the market pressures are different in different domains. And so it's one of the challenges, looking more broadly, why AI and data science is such an important activity and has been identified as one of the cross-cutting challenges. Because anyone who is young, coming out of university, out of college, with mathematical, computer science, AI skills, can get jobs in business at enormous salaries, and that's a market operating effectively. And the only way that we can get out of that is actually by training more people. And so we've got to respond to the pressures wherever they are. But the truth is that the pressures on jobs are different in different places. And it tends to be, if you like, the most specialist skills in the institutes, particularly around data, where there is the greatest pressure and the greatest pull from other organisations. And frankly, although it's very difficult, if someone goes and gets a terrific job in a business using their AI skills, that's a great success, actually. I mean, Ian should be very pleased about that, because that's about innovation. And so we've got to recognise that it is actually, and I've always thought, it's a great success for an organisation if one of one's staff gets a really good job elsewhere, because it says we're a good place to work because you will get good jobs afterwards. And so one's got to have a sort of a mature response to this. Actually, it may be a complete pain in the neck if you lose the best person working in a particular area, but for them it's a success, and it shows that you're an organisation that trains and develops people who are in demand elsewhere.
I'm going to combine a couple of questions, and Melanie, I'm going to put this to you if I can. Partly because you've been an executive chair in advance, or a CEO in advance, and the question was, what makes UKRI better than the component organisations that previously existed? And the other question is what's the biggest challenge for the interdisciplinary working?
Okay. So I think what makes us better as one organisation is that it reduces the barriers really to working across disciplines. And this is where the opportunity is. And we have this once in a lifetime opportunity to take this and work differently. And I think it's so exciting to think that there are some really big challenges out there. We've heard several of them mentioned. No one discipline can solve the challenge around plastics. We're going to need to come together in really different ways. And we can do that now. We can do that, and we can address challenges. Our research and innovation community can support us in that we just simply couldn't do as easily. So I think that is going to, well, to me, I think that's a step change actually in the way that we support research and innovation in the UK, and I think that's going to going to help keep us as a leading nation across the globe in research and innovation, and I'm really excited about that. I think the best way of working is in collaboration, learning from others, understanding the different perspectives that can be brought to bear on a particular problem, because you'll get the best outcome from that. So to me, it's very clear actually what the benefits are. Just remind me of the second question.
The second one was about
So I think I think those of us who have been trained in specific disciplines often have our head down around those problems. It's actually about lifting your head up and about being open to trying to learn and understand the language of others who work across disciplines. I've done this in my own research, working with engineers who have a very different philosophy and way of working and driving towards solutions. So it's about understanding people's language, being comfortable that you can't understand everything, building that trust in those relationships, and really co-designing and co-creating the solutions for an interdisciplinary challenge. Not one discipline being subservient to another, but actually being a shared endeavour. I think we do and support interdisciplinary work. We can do it better and more effectively, but I think we've got firm foundations to build on. Thank you.
Okay. There's a question. Fine at the back. Yep.
Hi. Yeah, I'd like to ask one of the top popular questions on the Slido. Staff want to know about when operational decisions are going to be made, such as pay harmonisation across all of the combined organisations, how we will cope with flexi time and all of the different ways that we work at the moment, and grade harmonisation, because they are quite different across all of the organisations. So my question is, when can we expect to know some of these answers?
Should I take that one? So the first thing that we've established is making certain that we have the common terms, the agreed terms and conditions for employing new people onto UKRI contracts. That was the start point. John Arnott, who's our Chief People Officer, is then working through to make certain that we probably start to modernise those terms and conditions as well, to make certain they're absolutely fit for purpose. That will then follow into thinking about how we harmonise across the piece. I, for one, would not be in a rush to start trying to harmonise everything until we're actually ready to start doing that. So I would say that John will work on that over the next 12 months. And my sense would be that we would be able to give you more of an update on that in around 6 to 9 months' time. Any other? There were some other hands, I know. So one down here. There's a...
Hi, I'm Ben Ryan from EPSRC. A little while ago, I read of a plan to review the dual funding system. And is that part of the Transform Our Funding service, or is that completely different? And what is the future for the REF and QR and so on?
I'll maybe take that question with David Sweeney not here. No, that's not part of the funding system, which is a sort of systems project. One of the things that the Act, the Higher Education Research Act, said was that that's one of the things that we have to do. So the job of the Board of UK Research Innovation is to provide advice to ministers on, firstly, the distribution of funding across the 9 councils of UK Research and Innovation, particularly across the research councils and Innovate UK. And I've said publicly on a number of occasions, we're not going to have radical swings overnight, because if you ask the question of what's the methodology for doing that, that's not straightforward. And although there's been a lot of historical basing to it, actually the decision as to how much you spend on physics as opposed to how much you spend on history or biochemistry, there's no single right answer to those questions, actually, so we're not going to swing that around. The other question, obviously, is, and this is a constant question, which is how the dual support system works. And, of course, for the very first time, the existence of the dual support system is actually enshrined in the Higher Education Research Act, so it is there by Act of Parliament. But clearly it is an ongoing task, again, to look at the balance of distribution between what flows through Research England and its counterparts in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. And that, again, is a piece of work which we will do. It's quite separate, and obviously we'll work very closely with stakeholders on that. And again, I don't imagine that there's going to be sort of radical changes overnight, because big changes in that would be potentially quite destabilizing at a time when there's a lot of other potential destabilization going on. And so that's a piece of strategic work which will be done, but it's quite different from how do we actually modernize our systems. And I think an important part of that is part of our efficiency has got to be an efficient interface with the institutions that we fund. In other words, we have to reduce both the opportunity cost for us and the opportunity cost for those that we work with. And I think it comes back to the grant systems project, where we've got to look there. We have got to really harmonise, which is, is it so fundamentally different to write a grant in chemistry or biology, or we've got to optimise that. And there may be different questions, but that's not actually a material difference in the system you require. So there's something about optimising our systems, but then there's the strategic question of balance of funding. That's quite different.
Yep, there's a question. I think your second question, I think. That's all right.
So I want to ask about people within UKRI, and it was good to see that people were valued in the presentations which were given here. But my question is, going forward, how are you going to nurture and value the staff within UKRI, and what are the plans for that? And then building on the question about harmonization, when we are all working under different terms and conditions, how do you expect us to work towards unified UKRI vision?
Well, let me say something about the latter first, which is that in any merger, you're bringing together people that have come from environments where there are different terms and conditions. And of course, the sort of TUPE-like basis of the transfer means that no one will be disadvantaged in terms of where they were before, in terms of their current works and conditions. So in that respect, but I mean, we have to recognize that harmonization will take some time. And we can't, as it were, simply take, as it were, the most expensive solution from every area of the domain and raise everyone to that, because that would dramatically increase our HR bill. And so we can't just do that overnight. And so the whole point about a merger like this is that TUPE says that your terms and conditions are protected. But, the truth is that it's an organization is actually people in an organisation have all sorts of different terms and conditions anyway, in the sense that they're doing different jobs, they get different reward for it. You shouldn't need that in order to, as it were, understand the vision of what the organisation is trying to achieve and get people to work together. Surely, the whole point about doing your jobs and enjoying doing the jobs is actually having a good understanding of what the organisation is all about, recognising your component part towards that and working to achieve it. In terms of the first part of your question, which is really important, part of being a good employer is actually helping people to develop. So it's about the potential for secondment schemes, continuous professional development, getting all of that right, and that is very important for us. And so I think that's one, again, where there's a good opportunity in UK research and innovation, because instead of 9 individual organisations, we have the opportunity, there's much greater opportunity for permeability across UK research and innovation, which didn't typically happen in the past. And so that staff development is very important. How we think about graduate schemes, how we provide flexible employment. To be quite frank, I was amazed to see a sort of clocking in machine when I came to Swindon for the first time. I'm not sure whether it's still there or not. But actually, if we're going to modernise practices, we actually have to have flexibility, and we have to trust our staff on that. And so, as I say, I was slightly horrified by that, but that's something that we will deal with over time. You really matter, and having good and interesting jobs matters to us. And a part of that is making sure, actually, that we use technology properly, we make the jobs as good as they possibly can be.
Yeah, just a very brief thing to add. I think one of the advantages of coming together as a single organisation is that the different councils can look at what each other are doing in terms of best practice for staff development and actually learn from each other. And I think that will benefit the organisation as a whole, just by having the different councils talking, discussing, seeing what works best for our staff, and adopting that across the organisation.
I have got hundreds of questions that have come in on Slido, and there's probably still some here, but in the interest of time, we really do probably need to take a break, because otherwise we're not going to do justice to what we've got lined up for after the break. So I can probably take one more question from the floor. I've got one down here or one back there, because the microphone is there, and that'll just save some time. Sorry.
But
Hi, my name's...
Say as they're coming in, we will, I think, undertake that we'll take those questions on Slido, and we will provide intranet answers to them, actually.
Hi, my name's Kate. I'm from the MRC. I'm the chair of the National Trade Union side for the MRC. I was just wondering if there's much appetite for, you're talking about imaginative research and innovation. How about innovative ways of looking at pay and how you manage your staff and systems like that, rather than relying on the government way, the Bayes way of doing things? So is there much appetite for looking at those sort of systems?
That's a very good question. And I generalise it much further, which is that we're UK Research and Innovation, and our job is that we fund research and innovation in business, we do it in universities, we do it in research institutes. You're quite right. We do actually need to do it, research and innovation, internally as well. And actually we need to understand what works in terms of research and innovation. And I think that I'll maybe hand over to Jennifer in a second to say something about that. But yes, I think that we do have to think about that. Clearly, we can't pretend that we're not in the public sector. But it is possible to innovate in the public sector, and I do think we need to think about that. I do think we need to think about flexible working. If we're going to have proper equality, diversity, and inclusion, then that's about the culture of the work environment, and that's something we need to look at for ourselves. And so I think it's a really good question. I do think we have to be innovative, but as it were, that innovation can't mean doing something that is so utterly, as it were, alien to the public service that would cause problems. But I think within that we still have quite a lot of flexibility. Jennifer, maybe you'd like to comment as well.
Yeah, sure. Just a couple of points. I completely agree with Mark that we should be and will be innovative, and that wherever possible that innovation should build on any evidence base we can find. I think it also has to come from all of you, actually. So you're asking the question of the panel, and we're leading the organizations, and we have to lead by example, and I'm really excited to have the opportunity to do that. But I can do that best in my council if you're all talking to me and saying what works for you, what are challenges for you, and bringing those to me, because I don't know what the world looks like from your perspective. I don't know what some of the blockages are that you're experiencing unless you actually talk to me. And I think I hope my other exec chair colleagues would say the same. And so that's not to say ask for whatever you want and we'll try to deliver it, because obviously we're all working within certain parameters and certain constraints and so on. But we will try to work it out with you, what would be an innovative, a useful, a good way through whatever challenges you are facing, or whatever ideas you have that you've seen somewhere else that work better than what we're currently doing. We certainly are not omniscient, and I wouldn't claim that the evidence base is there for everything that we'd like to do. So please do, the communication has to work both ways, and we will absolutely endeavour to make that work for all of us, I think.
Right, as Mark said, we will respond to every question. There are literally hundreds here. Apologies if we haven't answered the particular one you want. There are a lot of questions on pay. There's a lot of questions on employment things. So I'm conscious we've got to answer them. Can we take a 10-minute break, please? And then we'll be back for some great work under Jennifer and some of the other chairs. Thank you to the panel.